Welcome one and all to another episode of
Exceptionally
Average. My name's Steve Harris. Sitting next to me is my good partner and friend,
Greg Flack.
Craig
Good to
Flack.
be with you, brother. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year,
Through
man.
the wonder of recording, I already know it's going to be a Happy New Year. It is not New Year when we're recording it, but when it is released, boom, Lord willing, 2023.
Let's just assume we had a great Christmas and a Happy New Year and safe.
And that maybe by this point, Ohio State and Michigan are gearing up for a national championship game.
Wouldn't that be something?
Would our friendship make it through?
You know, I bet the ratings on that would be nearly as high as our podcast. Nearly. Yeah, it's like Super Bowl epic.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be remarkable. We've got a really good show today, I think. We're going to be talking about living our lives in the mundane. Because if I believe the internet, and I believe the internet, Craig, I believe the internet, it tells us that we live 60% of our lives doing mundane things, especially in a couple different areas of our lives. Number one, work. Mm-hmm. Number two, our marriage.
Most people right now are like 100% of my work is mundane.
100% of it is mundane. Yeah. And
our work, our marriage, parenting
with our kids. Yeah. Absolutely. Doing the things up and down the driveway a number of times, going back to events with our kids, home ownerships. All those things are the mundane. Let's call it the have-tos of life, right?
So how would you define mundane? I'm kind of putting that on you on the spot. Is there a definition?
So if I'm at work, I have to drive to work, right? I have a commute. I have a 15, 20-minute commute to work. It can be kind of mundane. Mm-hmm. I have a 15, 20-minute commute back home. When I get to work, I settle in. I shoot off some emails. I maybe make a conversation or two. I organize myself. I find reasons to or go through meetings. I'm organizing papers or thinking about what I'm focusing on. In my home life, I come home and, I might sit and watch TV alone, or I might go out and mow the lawn. Yeah, I might go out and wash the car, organize the garage, do the dishes, sweep the floor for my wife.
Cook steaks.
Absolutely. I might help change the bedding. I have to get a shower because nobody likes a stinky Steve, right? But these are the mundane things that we go through every day. And the argument that I would make is we don't find the power of those moments. As a matter of fact, we let them slip away. 60% of our lives is lived in the mundane. If that is true as an adult, Craig, then that means that 36 years of our lives are going through the mundane times and moments in an effort to get to those peak moments, those emotional highs, if you will. Where we get to go on vacation, where we get to go swimming, where we get
everybody's working for the weekend.
Everybody's working for the weekend.
We need 2 days instead of the 5 days.
We get to go out on the boat on Saturday or whatever that might be, or spend time with a friend or go to a football game or watch your favorite sports team on TV. We live for those moments. And as a matter of fact, in doing so, we dismiss the days that are right in front of us.
So what you're
and let those
you're
go.
Not saying that those moments aren't great. What you're saying is because we only live for those moments, we're missing more than half our life.
Absolutely.
Probably even more than 60% if we're honest.
I would say it's probably more than that. I think there's some opportunities in the mundane that we let go because we're looking forward to finding those emotional highs that sometimes don't always come. But even if they do, we let 5 days go by. And we're willing to do that so that we can get to that one day on Saturday where we're going to be going to dinner with friends, or we're going to be going to a movie, or we're going to be doing something that is more intriguing, leaving for vacation. And so we need to find the satisfaction, the value in the mundane. Mm-hmm. And how do we do that? And I kind of throw it to you, but we're going to talk about 4 key measures here, and we'll kind of break them down a little bit one by one. And I want to get these right. Number one, we have the opportunity for more connection during these mundane moments, to connect with people, connect with Christ spiritually. Yeah. We have the time for reflection. So to think about where we've been and where we're going. So that time of reflection can be extremely valuable. Then I would say, hey, we have the time to focus. all right, what does the future look like for me? How do I organize the rest of my day so that I can be more efficient? And then finally, the fourth element of it is we have the ability to take action. We don't have to accept being in one single position or being mundane or doing the ordinary. We can make every moment extraordinary. But how do we do that? So let's take these one by one, if you're okay with it, and kind of talk about the first one. Let's talk about the connection opportunity that we miss if we are living for the weekend, or we're living for 5-6 days down the road, or maybe we're living for, man, I can't wait until the end of January because we're heading on vacation to South Padre Island. We don't have the time, nor does Christ want us to wish the next 30 days away to get to that end of January, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the connection thing for me is huge. In fact, and I think it's good that we put it first. It's not that one is more important, but I think if we aren't connecting in the mundane, we'll miss the relationship.
Especially men. Don't you think men are especially vulnerable in that?
But even just in the, so I think that a lot of guys are divorced or go through divorce because they didn't maximize the mundane. They didn't realize the power of connection in the mundane. Or they didn't realize they don't have a great relationship with their kids because they didn't realize how much of the relationship, the connection, would have been forged in the mundane. This is an example from this week. My daughter is in ballet. She takes dance class. She had a parents' open house, like, come visit. I assumed she would just want mom to come, right? Because that's what a lot of the moms do. And she said, no, Dad, I want you to come. You have not seen me dance yet. Now, she doesn't know it, but that, like, meant the world to me because she never picks me over mom. And I was like, oh, my gosh, like, it's happening. I'll be honest, not the most exciting 25 minutes of my life.
I get it.
It was fairly mundane. It meant the world to her. It was mundane for me. And I had a moment. I would never say this to her because I wouldn't want her, but you can understand. I had a moment where I thought about getting out my phone because I was just bored. And what do we do when we're bored?
We start scrolling.
And I immediately was like, what is wrong with you? Look at your little girl. And, like, you don't hate yourself on your deathbed when you're like, why were you on your phone? Like, so by God's grace, but it was because of that connection. And in that moment, I was able to connect with her. It's a mundane thing to go visit or to go watch her dance class. She wanted me there. I have to believe that that was worth something. Now, I will go to the recital. I'll be excited to be at the recital, and I'll buy her flowers, and I'll be the dad that takes a picture with her, and I'll say, sweetie, you did wonderful, and she will. That won't be mundane. The recital's the big show. Just going and being there and being at the open house. And it smelled like a wrestling pit. A bunch of ballerinas. It reeked, by the way. And I told her that. I'm like, you guys smell. She's like, yeah, we get pretty sweaty.
They don't smell like flowers?
Yeah, no, I was like, what the heck, man? But that. I take Elsie to school every single morning because it's on my way to work. And that's 5 minutes I get with my daughter.
Isolated time where she's focused on you and you're focused on her.
You know what we do almost every morning? We listen to worship music. And I let her pick the song, or I'll pick a song, and then I'll explain to her what it means. And then usually if I pick her up from school, which isn't often, but then today I introduced her to the Beatles. I introduced her to classic rock in the afternoons. So she listened to Hey Jude today.
All right.
And,
tomorrow's Let It Be.
Yeah, exactly. And so she didn't like Black Sabbath all that much. That's okay.
All right, we'll get there.
But and so those are little mundane moments. Now, here's what I could do in the mornings. Be in my own head. I'm going to work. I got to think through all this, like you talked about your commute and just, have a good day at school, sweetie, all this stuff. I talk to her every morning. We listen to worship music. And then every morning when she gets out of my car, I pray for her, my son, and my wife every single day. It is the most mundane moment, but it's that connection to my kids, to my Heavenly Father, that makes that mundane something I would argue one of the most important things I do. And so it's really how I connect in those mundane moments. How do you try and do that in your different spheres, is connection in those mundane? Now, you're in sales, so I would imagine this is really important. This is kind of a curveball for you, but connection's everything in your business.
It is. I train salespeople, so I'm not directly linked to the customer.
Were for how many years?
For 20 years.
Yeah, so
absolutely,
you were in the people business.
I absolutely was, and I still consider myself. You and I are both in the people business.
If you screw up all the salesmen, you're gonna have a problem.
That's exactly right. So. Let me talk about first how I do it at home and what it means to me at home and how I look forward to now that my wife and I are empty nesters.
Mm-hmm.
You would think, gosh, it's just really boring. It's dull. It's pretty routine. And, for the most part, when I think about Sunday night through Friday afternoon when I get home from work, those 5 days are pretty repetitious. We can kind of count on what's going to happen with very little deviation.
Mm-hmm. You're both pretty type A too.
Very much so. But also what I really love to do, and I've had this conversation with my wife for a number of years, and I think she finally is starting to understand me a little bit. I make connection with her, and this is going to sound silly, and I don't mean it this way, but in the bedroom. But it's not what you think.
All right, here we go.
That's exactly right.
Exceptionally average after dark, folks.
That's right. Yeah. But my connection with her is we will shut off the lights in the living room, go in the bedroom, and we'll watch TV in the bedroom, like sitting on the bed, and like maybe there's some social media, maybe there's some other things we're doing, we're paying some bills, but there we are together next to one another in the same room, and we have some of our most powerful conversations as a result of that.
They weren't planned.
Yeah, in between the pages, right? And so those I find are extremely valuable, and I love being able to turn on Netflix and we watch something together. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we can share, we can talk about, laugh about, and we have some of the goofiest conversations as a result, but it's because there we are kind of confined in the same room, committed into that same room, doing some in a smaller space and saying, hey, we're going to enjoy the next 2 hours of whatever it is we're doing.
Bed,
exactly. Hanging out.
Time.
And so it's absolutely really enjoyable, and it's mundane. It can be boring. If somebody had a camera on us, they would be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Can I please turn the channel? But I just enjoy that moment with her, that time with her. It's
because of the connection.
Because of the connection. It has nothing to do with maybe even what's being said. It's just there we are present with one another.
Think about how many people don't maximize those connection points, and then they think, well, life is boring, it is mundane, and it's that. And it's like, you're not trying to connect with those around you.
I think divorce happens because people expect more peak moments than really what is available.
And I'll say this, and we can just be frank. When there's time in the bedroom, the really fun times, it's easy to feel in love with your spouse then. It's awesome. When there's time in the bedroom where you just described, where it's just the mundane and it's not the really fun times. Yeah. It's just average marriage.
Where she dumps clothes on the bed, and we both get up and we start folding.
Yeah. You're folding socks and underwear. And let's be honest, there's a lot more laundry than maybe the super fun times. But finding that connection in there instead of you sitting out in the living room on your phone, her sitting in the bedroom doing her thing, separate, grunting at each other, and then being like, oh, maybe we'll go on the boat this weekend and then we'll talk. You're going to talk once a week? I
find we have a difficult time connecting when we don't take advantage of the mundane.
Yeah.
And it's that ordinary, it's those have-tos in life that we kind of maximize some moments that really bring us together and get us some momentum for those peak moments. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that connection
they build to it.
It is
and
super
in fact,
powerful.
If there's some male listeners, and most male listeners would like to maybe maximize their sex life, if we're just being frank, I've met very few men. There are some that say we have plenty of sex, I'm good to go. Most guys would say if I could up that ante. If you spend more time connecting in the mundane, the dishes, the housework, the raising of children, you will almost certainly see a positive result. Not always, but almost certainly if you're in a fairly healthy marriage.
Right.
Because your spouse will feel more connected with you in that. So there's more opportunity for less mundane things because you're together in the grind of life, the load of life.
Craig, I think of one of the reasons that we come to church. Number one, we really like our pastor. I mean, he's amazing, of course. Yes, good looking, physically fit, yes, energetic. You know, and if it wasn't for his wife, we probably wouldn't come. But anyway, we come to church not necessarily, obviously, for the community and for the experience of Christ, and it's the Christian thing to do. But we come because it's a place that we can both connect.
Yeah.
We can walk out of here and say, hey, what'd you think of that? Tell me your experience with this, of what we just heard. I'll share my experience with you. Do you agree with this? Yeah, well, I do. And here's why. And so it gives us just another moment, another opportunity to make that mental connection with one another and kind of have the rest of the day to build on. And so those are really powerful opportunities.
I read the Lord of the Rings. I've gone through 2 books, Fellowship Ring and the Two Towers. My wife's an avid reader. And when I say avid reader, I'm talking just crushes books. And right now she's finishing a Middle Ages history of England with the Vikings, like stuff no one reads, 800-page histories, and then she'll jump on a fiction book, and she loves Tolkien, she loves Lord of the Rings, she loves fantasy, and then Middle Ages history. And I literally read Lord of the Rings for her so that we would have something to talk about. And it meant the world to her.
Yeah.
Because it's one of her favorite books. And so I was just like, I wasn't really interested. No, it's happened to be a very good book, and I've enjoyed it, but I wouldn't have picked it up but for my wife. But I did it so that we would have something in the mundane, in the in-betweens to chat about. When we're driving to and fro, we listen to the audiobook, and she's like, aren't you in love? And I'm like, it's okay. But I love that we have something to talk about. It's maximizing those moments and stuff like that.
And I think about it as
connection.
That's a great point. And I think about it at work too, in the connection. And what we get caught up so much in at work is, why am I doing this? I feel like I'm on a rat on a wheel, right? Sometimes. And people don't just say, well, you don't feel that way because you don't have a boring job. You really love your job. You feel like it's your calling. Well, yes, I do, and probably so do you. However, it doesn't go without having a lot of mundane moments.
If people always say, oh, you just probably love being pastor and preaching, it's like, preaching, I do half an hour a week. I probably work most weeks 50 hours a week.
That's probably, 2% of your entire workload?
Now, if you take the full sermon prep and stuff like that, let's call it, in delivery, let's call it 6 to 10 hours of a 50-hour week. That means there's 40-ish hours of not doing that. And if I'm not connecting with people along the way, I'm not doing my job. Beyond that, I've learned with my staff, when we have to do the mundane stuff, if I have a connection with them, or if I have volunteer connection, so building out this studio that people are watching, or if they're listening that we're recording in, this room was a hole-in-the-wall storage room that every church has.
Cold.
And it was cold. It had no heating issues. And I had a dear friend of mine, Andrew Greger. Him and I spent probably 15 or 20 hours changing this, putting up the backdrop, putting down the carpet, putting down sound dampeners, painting, electrical, running new HVAC to this room so that we could use it. It was a mundane thing. It was not recording. It wasn't doing anything. But it was our friendship along the way. Him and I lay in this carpet one night till 10 o'clock at night. It was the connection along the way.
Right.
That I guarantee he would say, I had a great time doing that. Not that it was fun.
Right.
But I enjoyed spending the time with him. And that's what can make the most of those moments.
I think of when I do the dishes, and it can be pretty boring, and nobody likes to clean up the kitchen afterwards. But it gives me the chance to realize these dishes allowed me the opportunity to sit down with my wife at dinner, or my family at dinner, and connect with them. So now when I think about that connection that we had, that time together, now all of a sudden doing the dishes is pretty rewarding, because it's a reminder of what you just had around you as far as making those connections. So when we kind of flip the script a little bit like that, and we look at it in a more positive light, I think the mundane becomes more appreciative.
Yeah.
And as a result, we're not as we don't experience that animosity of being in the mundane. Like, gosh, this is boring, and it's that person's fault that I'm always so bored. They're not making my life exciting.
You can either be a commute or an opportunity to pray,
Right?
or call an old friend. It can either be doing the dishes or an opportunity to be thankful that you had a meal with someone. It can either be folding laundry or doing it with your spouse.
Right.
It can either be a Monday night or Netflix night that you're going to watch your stupid show or whatever.
That's right.
Connection. So to our listeners, if you are finding yourself, and a lot of people are in this of like, life is just,
yeah.
And they think, well, I'll get divorced and that'll fix it. And it's like, it turns out divorce life is still,
that's pretty
I'll get
sucky.
a new job and that'll fix it. And the next job is still,
yeah.
It's because life has a lot of grind to it to stay alive. We're degrading organisms. And if you can maximize the connection in those moments, you will be amazed at what can come out of that. So let's put a pin in that. What was our number 2?
Our number 2 was reflection. Being in the mundane, doing the ordinary tasks gives us an opportunity to look back at what we've accomplished, what we've experienced, how we want to improve on an experience in the future, and just gives us that time to reflect and really consider. And you've probably experienced it a whole lot with your weight loss journey, that time of reflection, and when you're sitting or you're downstairs doing the exercises,
the bike,
right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, here I am riding this bike again, or I'm lifting this kettlebell again. Why am I doing this? Oh yeah, I remember what this has done
this is
for
one
me.
Too. I don't know that men are very good at reflection. We tend to like to stuff a lot of feelings and thoughts and keep it moving.
Do you think we're more forward thinkers and we don't think that the past determines our future?
I can't, not even that. I can't change it. It's painful. I'm not going there. You know, we all got the buddy that it's like, yeah, my wife left me this weekend. And it's like, oh my gosh, man, I'm so sorry. How are you doing? Well, I ain't dead, so I guess you just keep it moving, right? And you're like, yeah, I guess. And it's like, he isn't willing to go to that place. But man, I find that if you are not reflecting actively and regularly in your life, you're not going to be able to really think about the future, but you're also not going to really know who you are. You're not going to know what's going on in your own heart. Perfect example. Today, so this is just again today, I found myself, I drove out of my house and I was like, I'm getting a cup of coffee. Not a big deal. I'm going to get a latte, which is way more fatty than a cup of coffee. And when I drove through and I saw on the sign, it's like chocolate chip cookies. I'm like, oh, I'm getting a chocolate chip cookie. Now, a year and a half ago, that was normal. Now I never do that kind of thing. And I drove back in and I thought, I must be stressed about something. And I realized turns out Christmas is a pretty busy time for pastors. I've got multiple sermons to write. The church is packed. We've got a Christmas play. We've got grandparents coming in. The kids are doing the pageant this weekend, and all this stuff is going on. I've got to go to my parents. I've got gifts to give. I've got all this stuff going on. And I found myself, for the first time in maybe a long time, today, coping with food in a way that I haven't done in a long time since I've engaged my physical health. I took a moment to reflect on that and go, oh, I think I'm stressed.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was in the mundane moment. I was driving back to work. I was in the grind of work. I wasn't at the Christmas light. And I was like, but had I not reflected? And so I caught myself. And the reason that's important, no big deal. I had a cookie and a cup of coffee. It's not going to destroy my health. But what if I did it tomorrow? Because I'll still be stressed tomorrow. What if I did it the next day? Caused me to step back and be like, oh, don't let it go down a negative path.
That reflection is an opportunity to recognize how you were feeling in a moment.
And retool. If I didn't like what I was doing, or if you do like it. I mean, there's great reflection where it's like, man, I feel so alive doing X. This is great. And you reflect on that, and it's like, I want more of this.
Yeah, how do I create more of these moments?
I remember it's maybe one of the most profound things you ever said to me, and it's just has always stuck to me. You talked to me about one time your previous job being like a set of golden handcuffs.
Golden handcuffs.
Just share that with the audience real quick, because it was a big piece of reflection on your part that got you to leave a high-paying gig.
Job. Yeah.
But that took a lot of reflection, because the outside man just says, you got a good job, stick with it. What was the reflection there on how did you do that? Because it was mundane, it was just work, it was that kind of thing, paid well. Talk about that real quick.
Yeah, I'll do that. That's a really good question and an excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up. So my previous job was in sales in the forest products industry. That I sold corrugated packaging to food and beverage and other corporations where they package stuff. Anything that showed up in a grocery store, showed up at Kohl's or whatever was in a box, chances were good that our company or a competitor made it. And I had a really good paying gig. I had a territory where people left me alone for the most part. I had long-standing experience where the day just kind of became really routine for me, and it became somewhat easy.
Mundane.
Very mundane. But I felt like I was being paid a lot of money to do something that I didn't love.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was like being in handcuffs. However, the handcuffs were made of gold.
They're really nice.
So
handcuffs.
I can't lose these handcuffs because they're worth so much money.
You're taking nice vacations, I'm assuming.
I sure was.
Nice home.
I was providing for my family as well as anybody. I was putting money away in preparation for my kids to go to school or do whatever they needed to do. I was paying car payments.
Yeah.
I lived in a community where my wife did not have to work full time. And to step away from that would be absolutely crazy.
Mm-hmm. Doing well,
yeah. And people would look at me funny, like, what are you doing?
And think about how many men would have told you prior generation, yeah, you hate your job, boo-hoo.
Many men
You're making six figures and it's tough, boo-hoo. You're going to step away. Everyone hates, but it's that reflection of like, I don't know if this is who I want to be.
That's right. So that's exactly the course of action that I took. I said, is this the person that is this the path God has prepared for me? Is this all there is?
Corrugated packaging.
Yeah. Making a great living, going on great vacations, but I am not happy.
So living for that weekend, like we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait till Friday at 5:00 or Friday at 3:00 as a salesman.
Yeah.
You get to take off. And so there I was in the golden handcuffs. So I had a decision to make. I could either, if I were to get rid of the handcuffs, I also get rid of the gold that comes along with it. But I can hang on to that gold, but it's going to come at a price. I'm going to be constrained for a very long time until I decide to retire.
And you probably did stay longer than you wanted.
I did. I stayed about 6 or 7 years longer than I should have because.
But were you reflecting that whole time knowing too?
I buried it, just like what you said. I buried it because I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, going forward, things will be better. I will make sure they're better. Because, hey, look, my wife's happy. My kids are happy. They have everything that they need.
You're doing everything you're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah, and I look at my neighbor or I look at a coworker and I think, well, they're in the same grind as I am. We all hate our job. Let's just keep going and get this over with. I'll see you at 65.
Yeah.
And I finally came to the conclusion that I can't do this anymore. I'm unhappy. I am grumpy. And money doesn't mean a whole lot to me if I'm not enjoying myself.
And if you're destroying relationships.
Yeah. So that reflection was really key for me. And I really had to take a step back, evaluate who I am, who I was, who I want to be, because I didn't really like, much like you with the weight journey, I didn't like who I was professionally. I didn't like who I was becoming. And so I wanted to make a career path, somewhere where I could make an impact. And I thought, if I do something that I love, then it's not a job. It's actually a career. And if I can impact others, I thought, the money's going to come. And you know what? That's exactly what God blessed me with.
And it's just, that story popped to mind because I think it's the exact thing of like most of life, work is mundane.
Yeah.
What we're saying is there's an opportunity to reflect in the mundane, and what you might realize is I don't actually need to be here. I want to, I don't know this for certain, but would you say your job is more exciting and more life-giving now?
Absolutely. It's more fulfilling.
So because of that reflection in the mundane, you've actually eliminated some mundane from your life.
I've taken action.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
But it is that reflection. And the reason I think men and women listening should do that, because you have an opportunity to reflect on that life. There's is Simpsons past your time? You probably didn't watch much Simpsons.
I love The Simpsons.
Okay, there we go. Well, there's this famous scene where Homer, when it goes to his brain, all he sees is he hears crashing waves and seagulls.
Yeah.
And like, so inside Homer Simpson's brain is basically white noise.
Right.
I think a lot of our people go there because reflection is hard, reflection is scary, but how much of our life is just passing by?
Mm-hmm.
So again, asking the question of yourself, do I like who I am as a father? Am I happy where I am as a husband? Am I happy with this? And you think, I don't have time, Craig, to think about that. You know, I have 15 minutes on the way to work to shut off the radio.
Plenty of time
to think strategically. This is a true story. I do some of my best sermon prep in the shower. Why? Because it is a mundane task. And I have literally had to holler to my wife, get in here.
Write this down.
And write this down, because I had my sermon come to me. I have more than a dozen times been doing the dishes and had my sermon points come to me, to where I've had to stop doing the dishes, go type them into my phone real quick, and then go back to do it, because I'm doing something mundane and I set my brain loose to reflect. In fact, there are times where I will do chores literally to do reflection, because I can just occupy my hands with something. I'm a woodworker, sanding a piece of wood. I figured a lot of my life out standing behind a sander, just reflecting in that.
I fully understand that. My time is probably mowing the lawn, and driving in the car. Now, even with my wife next to me, and she might be talking, there's a lot of times where might not even listening, and she'll say, "You aren't even listening," and I'm thinking, That's a strange way to start a conversation.
You weren't talking.
Yeah. So my time in the car encourages me to reflect. There are times, even with the radio is on, I'll just start thinking about my day or thinking about what's upcoming and how do I improve upon that. And I get a lot of ideas come to me just by doing the boring, tedious stuff. But you have to allow your mind to go places.
And there's a lot of people that won't.
That you otherwise might intentionally prevent it from going places.
And like you shared, we've all got them. So, okay, that's reflection. What's number 3?
Number 3, focus. So when I think of focus,
which really is a natural dovetail, you've
reflected. Now the focus transitions to, okay, how do I make this take place, knowing what I already know and what I've already thought about. And so I have a lot of focus opportunities, and my focus opportunities really get my mind racing. Now, it's almost to the point to where I get racing too far ahead of myself and things don't even become real so much, and I kind of have to pull back. But that's also very beautiful, because I would rather have to pull back on my dreams, trying to make them a reality, than trying to force them to go even further.
I always said I'd rather have an employee that's a wild horse that I have to tame versus one that I can't get to do anything.
Right. So some of my ideas that I might bring forward to my wife, she's like, we can't do that. Well, actually we can, and I figured it out how. And so,
hear me out. We're going to steal the Declaration of Independence.
Exactly. Not all banks have cameras, honey.
and the ones that do seem to be terrible.
That's right. So I think opportunities of focus are naturally a dovetail, like you said, on the reflection. You've learned something, you have gleaned something from a moment or an experience. Now you can take that forward and apply that to something in the future that's going to make it better, improved upon, or more fulfilling.
Yeah, I think for me, reflection naturally leads to focus, because I'm able to then say, okay, I've reflected upon this. Now I need to focus in and drill down.
Yeah.
I've I keep coming back to it, but I take it really seriously with parenting my kids. I'm a very active father because I just think that I get about 13 years and then I get about 6 years, maybe 5 years of them reflecting back, and then it's over. Then I'm just a dude that, like, hopefully we have a great relationship and it continues, but they're out of the house and they're going to be an adult able to make their own decisions. So I take it really, but a lot of times the general reflection can be like, oh, okay, how are we doing? This kind of thing. The focus becomes I need to kind of drill down on that. I need to kind of, perfect example this past week, there was a little boy in our church that asked a girl out in our church, and the girl was like mortified, and the parents were like, "Oh, I didn't think he was doing that yet. Don't And it's no big deal. Kids do that stuff. Not a big deal. But the little girl didn't want that, and so we talked to the boy about like, hey, you need to respect boundaries and that kind of thing. And the girl was like, it's okay, he thinks you're pretty and he likes you and he wanted to be your girl boyfriend.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But I'm like, I was reflecting on that, and the focus brought me to what we'll talk about next, which was action. But I was like, I should probably talk to my daughter about that.
Yeah.
She's in 4th grade. What would she do if a boy asked her out? And again, this isn't going into some weird Christian dating thing of like,
right.
It was just more like, I don't know what my daughter would do. So it started, the reflection started the focus in on that kind of thing. And again, we'll talk in a second about the action, but it naturally dovetailed the connection in the relationship. My daughter brought about reflection. I wonder, dating, 4th grade, they start to think about that and have crushes and stuff like that. Focus in. I haven't really talked to her about that.
Right.
So I think focus allows us to start to say what's important. Because also reflection, think about this. How many times do you reflect on things that aren't worth our time? You and I reflect a ton on football. We just do. It's in the mundane. We use it for reflection. There's nothing wrong with that. But
there is.
But like, there's nothing wrong with occasionally. But rarely do we focus in our time and energy.
We're not writing the team and saying, hey, I have an idea for your next game plan.
Someone was asking on Twitter, would you donate to Ohio State's NIL collective? And people were like, for only $25. I'm like, y'all are nuts.
Yeah.
You're going to give money?
Yeah.
Like, and I understand it's like, well, Craig, you buy like a team sweatshirt. I'm like, yeah, I get a sweatshirt then. Well, you bought tickets. I get to go to the game.
Yeah, you get something from it.
Give money to the. You are crazy. And people were like, of course I will, to see them. I'm like, okay, your focus is maybe off. Anyway, side note.
Yeah.
We'll go back to episode on being a fanatic.
Right.
On that kind of thing, because that was the definition of fanatic behavior. Sure. But the focus, we start to say, okay, what is actually important? What is true? Reflection allows me to sort out truth from lies. Reflection in our marriage gets to say, hey, that's maybe not always true. Maybe this is true. Focusing in on where do I actually need to grow. Reflection in or focus in our career. Does that kind of make sense?
It sure does. I think of it not just at home, but also at work. And I'll give you an example because this is the world that I live in. Focus allows me to establish an objective. And once I understand my objective, what the strategy is, the target, now I can begin to backfill with the tactics that are going to help me get to that objective. And you could be an operator on a manufacturing line. You could be a salesperson out in the field. You could be a pastor. But if you understand, and once you start to really focus and drill down, I'll use your term, focus on what that objective is, the thing that we must know, that we must do, not all the other ancillary stuff that is kind of nice to have on the side, but focus on the objective. Now we can really drill in on the tactics that are going to help us to achieve that goal.
Let me ask you this, talking about what we did before, in you changing, when you started to focus on changing your job, what were some of the things that came out of that? Like when you really focused in, was it like, okay, I need to figure out a new career? Is it, I need to figure out money? How did you start to focus in on that?
Yeah, that's another really good question.
Take the example, and our listeners are already walking through. Okay, so how did you focus in more on that?
Some people I think are motivated by the fire or the carrot.
Yeah.
And I think there's a carrot that's out in front of you and like somebody dangles it and you say, I want that.
Mm-hmm.
Other people are focused on the fire behind them.
100%.
Like, this is
I'm a
not
fire
working.
guy.
This isn't working for me. This burns.
Mm-hmm.
I need to do something quick, and I am a fire guy because I will
absolutely
stay in a position doing the same thing over and over again because I am loyal to a fault. So I found the fire behind me kind of burning my britches and saying, this is uncomfortable. I don't like it here. I'm not happy when I go home. I'm not happy when I wake up in the morning. I do things to distract myself throughout the day so that I don't have to focus on my work. And I don't really like the people that I work with, by the way. And I thought, this really stinks. I can't do this for the next 27 years. Yeah. And so that was the fire behind me. I thought 27 more years of this is terrible. So that was my initiation to jumpstart my career change. And I just began having some conversations with some people. And, listen, it's no secret that I work at Crown. And a lot of people, when you live in Mercer County, a lot of people who work at Crown say, hey, you guys got any job openings over there? What are you doing? Like, Steve, there's 700 job openings. Have you been on the careers.com? Like, no, I haven't. Go look. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of jobs that fit your skill set. There's a number of jobs that don't. But I just took a chance and applied because the worst thing that can happen is I might get an interview and I might have to go talk to somebody and tell them why this might be an opportunity for me or why it might not, because you're interviewing them just like they're interviewing you. And I took it much more seriously this time because I wasn't begging for a job. Yeah. I already had one. I wanted a career change. And if it wasn't right for me, I wasn't going to accept it. Now, God willing and God creating that pathway for me, he introduced me to some people that I really liked that felt like I was a really good fit. They were going to keep me in the realm of sales, even though it was a different angle of sales and training. And I thought, there's something being told here. I took the time to pray about it, had conversations with my wife. And honestly, my wife was like, are you sure this is the right move for you? Because she saw the money too. And she's like, just battle through. My dad, he went to work every day on a factory line and he sucked it up until retirement. Like, yeah, I guess that's what you do, right? But I didn't see that for myself. I wanted to make an impact on people. And the only way I could do that was through a career change.
So let's pivot then, because we're starting to blend. So you started focusing in on the things you would need to do, talk to some folks, rely on connections, these kinds of things. So for our listeners, using that mundane, you've reflected, you focused, you can reclaim some of this. Let's talk about how you can take action to then potentially alleviate some of the mundane, or you've just taking action in the middle of it, that there's these powerful moments. You started obviously then, because focus becomes a plan of action.
Focus becomes a plan of action without question. So for you, I had to think about what that fire was. And that focus was, I can't do this for another 27 years.
The mundane that was killing you was this work.
And it caused me to think about, okay, I know what I don't want. Now I need to determine what do I want? And what does that look like? What if I had to write a movie in an ending of the story for myself, what does the end of the story look like? And then work backwards from there, set your objective and then build your tactics underneath to support it. And so you're right. Now I had the focus. Now I needed to put it into action. And I think we all find ourselves at some point in our life, multiple times in our life, where we are at a crossroad. We have the opportunity, call it the fork in the road, call it the crossroad, whatever you want to call it. We come to that stop sign and we have an opportunity to go a number of different directions. It is not dumb luck that we choose the right path. It is not dumb luck that we choose the wrong path. It's simply not understanding what your objective is and being true to yourself. And I had to be true to myself, and taking that action was very key for me, taking one step at a time. And that's what I needed to do. I just needed to break it one step at a time. If I looked at the whole piece of the pie, it became too overwhelming, Craig. I couldn't do it. I found myself overwhelmed and almost paralyzed because it was too big of a decision with something that I had been doing for 20 years of my life. And now I'm making a career change midway through my 40s. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, you're just having a midlife crisis, but you're
Right.
gonna go buy a boat, man.
Right. So I'm trying to convince myself that it's a midlife crisis, or I'm trying to convince myself, no, this really is a crossroad and I need to make a move.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking that action, and that action was having a conversation. That's all I'm going to do in this moment. I'm going to have a conversation. And then when that conversation takes place, now my next action is, all right, I'm going to have another conversation, or I'm going to, maybe what you do is you go through the cycle and now it gives you an opportunity to reflect. I'm going to reflect again. Once I reflect, now I'm going to take another action. Okay, I've taken another step. Well, that another step may cause me to reflect once more. And so you go through this cycle, and as long as you're willing to allow that to happen and put yourself in a position where you are vulnerable and allow yourself to be vulnerable, because we don't like to be vulnerable as men. Mm-hmm. We do not like to admit that, hey, I'm not in a good place right now in my mid-40s.
Have you ever heard your wife apologize a lot?
All the time.
Yeah.
All this. She's like, I'm sorry you're an idiot.
Both of our wives don't listen to this, so we can talk smack about this. And if they do, sorry, sweetie, but you know.
That's right. And if somebody reports back to them, we will deny it. This will be deleted immediately.
Yeah. Very few men are like, oh, my wife. No one likes vulnerability.
Nobody likes vulnerability.
It shows that like you're being honest before people.
But reflection and action, as they go together, as you had mentioned, they require vulnerability.
100%. Yeah. Otherwise, it's lame.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. One of the things for me, I always laugh about the church world, and you've been in the church for 30 years.
Sure.
And, you know, and I've been a pastor now, full-time ministry since 2009. And I said, the church loves to stop, to reflect, to focus, to build a plan, to build a plan, to build a plan, to build a plan. Another way, load the gun, aim, have
right.
a committee on aiming, have a fundraiser about the aiming. We're going to shoot sometime. We're going to talk about the shooting. We're going to put a poster in the hallway about shooting. We're going to have a sermon about shooting. It's going to be so great when we shoot, but we got to be perfect.
Oh, yeah.
We can't make anyone mad.
I'll give you an example. My wife is notorious for this, and here we are. I'm going to pick on her for just a moment. She is notorious for having her camera on her phone on and waiting for that perfect moment in the picture. And guess what happens? It never comes, and people just go separate ways, and she's missed the moment entirely.
And if we do not take action, because we're so captivated with it's got to be focused, we've got to focus it perfectly. We've got to get have we talked to everyone? Have we reflected enough? Sometimes you just got to pull the freaking trigger.
Yeah, do we have enough buy-in?
Sometimes you just got to make a move.
Right.
And I have been, in my career and in my marriage and in my life, I have erred towards action, and it has panned out mostly well.
Right.
If you err towards action, it will almost always go well in that you're doing something.
Right.
If you've actually reflected, and again, this whole thing is about reclaiming the mundane.
Right.
It's no one really needs, like, when you're on vacation, taking action and being like, we're going out to dinner.
Right.
It's fairly easy. We're going to Pigeon Forge and here we come Dollywood. Like, that's not difficult. It's the mundane of like raising kids where it's like, well, that's a really important thing. Sure, but it's every single day for 18 years. It's going to be a little bit mundane. If you want to have a great pearl of wisdom on their graduation day, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's one day.
Right.
But did you take advantage of the mundane?
Right.
Your career. Well, when I get my promotion, okay, you might need to work 5 years for that. My marriage, okay, when I have our anniversary dinner, you might not make it to another one. This whole thing's about maintaining recapturing the moments of the mundane, and we're saying you can do that by connection, then reflection, through focusing. Maybe it's just one of them. But I think ultimately it comes down to
action has to take
doing
place.
Something. So again, I am begging dads all the time to stop being a mom's helper, but be a dad.
Yeah.
Be active in your kid's life. Know what they're going through. So I brought it up just now about the thing. My daughter was sitting there Sunday. I said, hey, sweetie, I got a question for you. You won't be in trouble. There's nothing. I'm just asking. what would you do? Has a boy ever asked you out? He was deer in headlights. No. I said, you're a beautiful girl. Maybe a boy has asked you out. Do you have a boyfriend? Like, did you? No. Are people in your grade dating? Not really. Okay, that's good. He's fourth grade. He probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, right.
She's like, the boys mostly care about football and kickball. I was like, yep, that sounds about right. Okay. But I was like, what would you do if a boy did ask you out? I don't know. And it led to a great conversation.
What a great conversation.
It was
what an opening.
But I was able then also to give what our family expectations are. That we wouldn't have our 9-year-old, 10-year-old dating anyone because that's silly and absurd.
Right.
But that when she comes of age as a teenager, if she wants to go on dates and stuff like that, we will be open to talking with her.
And there's
about
some
that.
expectations.
Yeah. But in the meantime, if a boy asks her out, she can just say, my daddy won't let me date anyone. And we had this conversation, but it took action. It was a little uncomfortable. It was a little kind of awkward. I didn't know how that conversation would go. My wife didn't say a word because she doesn't love conversations like that. There's times in the church where I've led us in directions. I'm like, I don't really know how it's going to go. This past year, I got up and I put our church on the hook for needing $15,000 in 4 weeks.
Yes, you did.
To raise money for a feeding program in Honduras to feed kids and to do an outreach program. I said we would do it because they needed an answer before I could get formal approval. So I just said we would do it. And then I got up on a Sunday morning and I basically came hands
Hey, by the way, y'all,
I need $15K. By God's grace, we raised $32,000. Now that wasn't because I reflected on the moment, I focused in, and I knew what we were doing. But at sometimes, just take an action. And by the way, if I had said I need to go and get approval and wait and all these things, the moment would have passed. The timeline didn't allow for that. There are just times where you have to take action in life, and they often come in the mundane areas, but the action can actually lead to some really exciting things.
It sure can.
And it can maximize a moment in such a way that a mundane Sunday afternoon talking with my daughter became a
connection.
Yeah.
It became a connection. The cycle started over again.
And it's like suddenly this mundane, she was literally sitting there watching football with me. She's been watching football lately, and it was great. And I was like, hey, let me talk to you about this. It was 5 minutes, and it was goofy, and she was giggling because it was embarrassing for her to have her old man asking her about this. But we had a moment, and I took action, and we had this conversation, and it came out of this reflection of like, man, boys are asking girls out already like in this age. Oh man, I haven't talked to my own daughter about this. And it would have been very easy for me to just sit there and hear white noise and seagulls like Homer Simpson because it's Sunday afternoon and the Cowboys are playing and the Seahawks are playing and the Browns are playing and I just want to watch football.
There's a power in moments. Now, we can find those moments in peak moments, but those are kind of the expected moments.
Everyone expects. I very rarely hear someone say.
The power of moments comes in the quietest of times. Yeah. And those are the times that you remember when you're just sitting on the couch next to one another, whether it's your child or a friend or your wife, and something just manifests as a result. And those are the things that you remember. And the things that we have to embrace. And those are the opportunities that we need to look for. It's okay to go through the mundane.
Yeah, you're gonna have to.
Mundane is necessary because
we're talking about trying to reclaim some of it.
It
there's
allows
be
you
some dead loss.
It allows you connection. It allows you reflection. It allows the focus and then obviously the action. But you have to create and find those moments.
It's an action in itself to reclaim it. I've told my wife this before. Even sad couples and even bad couples tend to celebrate their anniversary. Yeah. Like if you stop celebrating your anniversary in any form or fashion, a card, a hug, like some of Steve's famous bedroom time that he was talking about earlier, you've probably gotten to a point where you know your marriage is in a tough spot.
Right.
That's the easy stuff. What we're saying is it's easy when you're riding the high to do that. are you maximizing the 60% of your life? That's
Right.
not the anniversaries.
Right.
That's not the graduation parties. That's not these great moments. Are you making the most of those moments? Because if you're not, and this is why we did this whole episode, we would argue you're missing out on a huge part of your life.
You're missing out.
I wrote down here, what is missed if we don't do this, if we don't maximize the moment and make the most of each mundane moment? You miss life.
Yeah, you do.
And here's the thing. That's sad, but I know we would both agree. A lot of people are missing life.
They sure are.
Like, that's why we did this. If people are listening, like, okay, well, why would I need... You might be missing it, man.
I'm frustrated by people who, gosh, can't wait till this weekend, or just booked a vacation for February, can't wait. Be careful with those statements.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with enjoying and being excited about the vacation. But do you have anything now? And again, you made a major life change because you couldn't answer that.
Right.
That's okay at times. But other times, what we're just saying is there's people just missing it. And if you miss the mundane, if you don't maximize those moments and you don't see the power in them, you will get to the end of your life and say, well, I was supposed to be at 65, and now I'm supposed to... You won't have relationships because you didn't invest in the way you should along the way. You probably won't have your health. You probably might not have your marriage in the way you wanted to because you just hated your life. You were bitter, you were angry, you hated your job, and you took that out on your spouse and all this stuff. It's a tale as old as time. And when you were waiting for life to begin, suddenly you're going to look back and be like, and by the way, most people do that. They look back in their 80s, and it's why they have some wisdom, and they say, hey, don't miss it.
Everything that we do, everything is surrounded by time. We can put a halt to a lot of things except time.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't recognize that time is a factor and it can be a gap in our lives, then you're right. We're going to look back and we're going to have regrets. And the way you don't have regrets is by maximizing those mundane moments, because you're right. I think it makes up more than 60% of our day.
And little plug, my first sermon of the year is going to be on time. Maximizing your time. It's the most important asset you have, and no one thinks about it.
I
so
completely agree.
There's your little plug.
Look how intuitive I am.
You are. You have reflected.
This is the experience that I bring to this podcast. You know that, right?
This is why we've got you on there. This is why I think your name's first.
This is why it's not called the Craig Show.
That's coming in 2023. No one's listening to the Craig Show. Yeah, we laugh. We've said enough about our wives in this episode that we will now know if they listen.
Oh, yeah.
Because
we'll hear about
we're
this.
We're going to just steadily talk a little bit more nonsense each and every episode.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll just know. Because I know your daughter has said nice things to us about she listens. Your son-in-law has said nice things. People in the church, some of my friends, some of your friends.
Right.
They're very kind.
Yeah.
So we'll see, ladies.
That's right. You're up.
Anything else, Steve, as we wrap this up?
Looking forward to 2023. Live your life in the mundane and just take advantage of it.
Amen, brother. Good talking with you.